5. Kama Ipake. The Chinese sickness leprosy. Then, one morning, everything about my life changed. It started like any other day with Yellow Cat jumping on my face. I yawned and pulled him onto my shoulder. I scratched his cheek and waited for his purring to put me back to sleep. I felt my mother shaking me. "Wake up, Pia, you have school today." I opened one eye. Sunlight streamed through the door. Parrots chattered in the palm trees outside. I groaned and turned over on my mat. What illness would convince my mother to let me stay home? "Maybe I'll tell her my throat hurts," I whispered to Yellow Cat. I lay there dreaming of how I could spend the day with Kameka, working in the callow patch or swimming at Waikiki. I imagined myself swimming faster than he could. But then I heard them again, the purr of Yellow Cat in the voice of my mother. "Pia. Don't make me call you again. You have school today, and no sickness you can dream up will keep you home." My mother pulled my blanket off. "Pia," she gasped. What have you done to yourself?" Her voice cracked. "Oh, not you, Pia, not my only son." Suddenly I was fully awake. I sat up. "Lie down," she commanded. She pushed me back onto my tummy. "Your shoulder. There are spots." I lay there while she examined my neck and shoulders. It probably slept with a mosquito, I thought. If only mosquito bites could keep me out of school. "Ow," my mother moaned. "This is so terrible. Ow." She slumped onto the mat beside me. She fell across my body and squeezed me so hard I hurt. Her hot breath warmed my back and I felt her tears washing over my shoulder blades. I shuddered without even knowing why. "What?" I demanded. "What is wrong?" I tried to raise myself. I wanted to see what my mother was so worried about. But the weight of her body pressed me to my mat. "You cannot go to school," she said. "Your teachers might see them." I tried again to sit up, and this time she let me push her away. I strained to see the spots, but it was impossible. "I can't even see them," I said. "How could my teachers find them?" "You could get new spots on your forehead or your elbows." My mother pulled at her hair and moaned. My sister stared. Her large brown eyes were wider than ever. Slowly her thin face crumpled and she began to wail. "Ow, ow. You'd think I was dying," I shouted. "Why do you cry as if you were at my burial?" Suddenly I wanted desperately to go to school. I couldn't wait to take the examination my teacher had planned. I jumped to my feet and pulled on my pants. I ran my fingers through my hair and began putting on my shirt. But I was nervous and had trouble with the buttons. My mother interfered, pulling me hard against her. "You cannot go," she said. You have," she was sobbing. Leprosy." Her voice shook so that I barely understood her. "The spots, they are just like my sister's. The teachers will find out and then they will ship you away." She is teasing me, I told myself. I don't feel sick. She knows I was going to pretend to be ill, so she's trying to scare me into school. I knew it wasn't true. My mother loved to tease, but she wouldn't play with me about such a dreadful thing. And since I couldn't believe such unbearable news, I taunted her. "At least you won't have to drag me out of bed every day." My voice went into the soft darkness of her clothing. She thrust me away from her then, so hard that I fell back on my mat. "I am not playing with you," she screamed. "You have leprosy. I know it when I see it. And there is nothing good about the leprosy island. There is not enough shelter there and never enough food." Her voice slipped and rose in a terrible chanting. "And no eating poi with your family, no Yellow Cat, and no Kameka." Her terror spilled onto me then. It burned my insides until my legs felt like the tentacles of a jellyfish. I needed to run. Kimmy wailed, and my fear grew hotter. I had to escape. I crawled past the two of them and out the door. But they followed me to the doorway. My mother slumped against the doorframe crying, "Ow, ow, Pia." I jumped to my feet then and ran to my horse. I slipped the rope from the fence post and grabbed Maui's black mane, pulling myself onto his back. I dug in my heels and slapped him into a gallop. But I could not outrun Kameka's voice. "Leprosy is contagious," he had said on that day in the mountains. I didn't know if leprosy was contagious. I only knew that the foreigners thought it was, and for some reason Kameka believed them. I hadn't touched the sick man in the mountains, had I? No, I was sure I had not. Kameka had been there to protect me. Then how did I get the disease? The face of my mother's sister floated into my mind. She had died at her house before the government began sending people with leprosy away. She'd lived a long time at home. Eventually she'd lost the feeling in her fingers. I'd seen her holding the hot rocks of the ground oven while digging out baked sweet potatoes. She did not flinch when the heat of the rocks sizzled her flesh. At least it doesn't hurt, I said to Maui. At least leprosy doesn't feel bad. But as soon as I said it, I remembered my aunt's death. I heard again her moaning for water. I saw the swollen mouth she could no longer close. Go! I screamed to Maui. Faster! I leaned into the wind and urged my horse to outrun the memories. Take me to a place where leprosy cannot go, I pleaded. Maybe I should head him into the sea, I thought. That would put an end to the leprosy. I could die quickly and Kameka would be glad that I didn't have to go to Molokai. Kameka. When I imagined him finding me dead, I nearly cried for the grief he would feel. Kameka had always been the one to repair my wounds, cleaning the dirt from a stubbed toe or pressing crushed noni leaves onto a cut on my heel. He'd taught me everything I knew about Hawaii's plants, the ones to use for healing, and how to plant crops for food. Together we had waded through the watery callow patch, harvesting tubers like father and son. I had never known who my real father was. I only knew that he was Haole, a white foreigner. Even if my mother's looking glass had not told me this truth, there were plenty of people around me who had. For as long as I could remember, I'd been called Hapa Haole, half white. I supposed my father was a sailor who'd come and gone when it pleased him. But whenever I asked her, my mother frowned and pushed my question aside. Don't worry about him, she would say. He isn't here. But Kameka is. Be glad you have Kameka. I was glad. And now, suddenly, I knew I must find him. He would know some remedy. Kameka would make everything right. I turned my horse toward home. By the time I tied Maui to the fence post, the sun was high in the sky. My family wasn't home. The yard was silent except for the clacking of palm branches in the breeze and the clucking of chickens as they searched for worms under the sugarcane. I brought a knife from the cookhouse and cut a stalk of the cane. With a sharp whack I cut a section for chewing. Then I cut shorter lengths to give my sister when she returned. I sat in the red dirt under a banana tree and nibbled on the cane. My aloneness moved in on me like a dense fog. I didn't know where my mother was. Probably at Kameka's home, crying with Lonnie and Tutu. She had heard too many stories about Molokai. Some Hawaiians said the stories couldn't be true. Lonnie insisted that the Board of Health would not dump our people on a desolate peninsula without enough food and clothing. And if they did have needs, they would share with each other. After all, she'd say, they are Hawaiians. I hope the rumors are exaggerated, my mother would say. But other people believed the rumors. Some angry citizens wrote letters to the newspapers. They said it was unfair to separate sick people from their families just when they needed them most. On cool evenings, after sharing a meal of fish and poi, my mother had read these letters to Lonnie and Tutu. I'm glad the settlement was not there when my sister had leprosy, my mother would say. At least when she died, she was at home with her family. Kameka agreed with his mother that the sick people on Molokai could help one another. They can be ohana to each other, just as we are like family, he said. It's better for everyone that they go. But mostly Kameka didn't like to think about such sad things. Come, he would say to me whenever the subject of leprosy came up. Let's go for a swim. And while the women argued over what happened to people with leprosy, we would escape to the adventures of the sea. I hadn't thought much about it until after the day when the man with leprosy had tried to help me in the water. On that day Kameka's laughing eyes had become dark points of fear. No, it couldn't be fear. Kameka was fearless. Wasn't he? I sat alone in our yard and wondered what Kameka would do when he found out. How can I tell him? Why did I think he could fix it? Slowly, as these questions pressed in on me, the sweet juice of the sugarcane turned sour in my mouth. The cane slipped from my fingers onto the red earth. Ants scurried to devour it. My mother's crying echoed deep within me and I put my head between my knees and started to moan. The chickens settled into the dust at my feet. Suddenly the day was hot and desolate. In the awful stillness I began to feel how it would be to live the rest of my life without the things I loved. I cried then for Kimmy and the way it felt to carry her on my back. I cried for Hawaii's soft nights with family swapping gossip around a fire. For the bright eyes I saw through the flames. And for the stories and laughter that swirled around us like sweet-smelling smoke in the darkness. I grieved because I hadn't learned to swim as fast as Kameka. And now it was too late. Hurry, Kameka. Come. There isn't much time.